and I get this message coming up on my screen about other people trying to get control over the screen. I hope that I don't have to do anything with that, do I?
No, you should be fine.
Okay.
And just a quick note for everybody, this is definitely something that you should be able to sit back and watch. Please don't try to take control of the screen or anything of that nature. If you do have a question, please reach out to me. I am signed in as Neudesic Webcast, so you can click on Neudesic Webcast and enter a chat with me, or you can send me an email or submit a question via the Q&A functionality within Live Meeting.
Great, thanks, John.
Yeah, and if you get any of those requests, just deny them.
Okay, with pleasure.
Okay. All right.
Rogue presenter. Here we go. I just want to, right at the start, point out and apologize. Well, I don't really want to apologize, but my accent, I am South African, so every now and then I'll use proper English instead of American, and so hopefully you'll get used to my accent and understand what we're going to be talking about. I want to go over the agenda quickly. And that is, I'm going to be going over an overview, and I'm going to look at 4 different scenarios. And each of those scenarios is going to focus on a specific theme. And then within the scenario, I want to talk about a little background of that specific case, business needs were, what the requirements are, and then go in and talk about a methodology, solution, and at the whole time I want to keep demoing a particular scenario, and at the end we'll have time for questions. The point of this is I'm not going to present a whole solution, but rather specific parts based on that theme of the scenario, and the whole intent is to really stimulate ideas as to different ways that reporting services can be used to solve actual problems. And true enough, we're going to solve actual business needs. So the first scenario is a company called Business Controls, and the theme that I've chosen there is interactivity. And we're going to see interactivity in the report menus. We're going to have clickable pie charts, drill downs, expands, how to control user profiles. Then scenario 2, the theme is updating, and the company there is Crimson Circle Energy Company. And there we're actually going to use reporting services to do database updates, and I'll show how that is done, and also on-demand data loads. Scenario 3, I've called that precision. For this financial institution, I got the most incredibly precise requirements that I've ever seen in my life. The specifications listed out the fonts, the font size, where things started on the page, what sort of alignment, what colors to use in the charts and in the pie charts. Incredible. And scenario 4 is what I've called framework, and I'm kind of scared to use that word framework, but when I show it to you, you'll see what I mean. And that's for a sexual offenders registration. And the whole point of the framework is producing letters and flyers and how different components of this can be reused. And I want to acknowledge that we've got a whole host of different job roles that are attending today. So I'm going to stay more or less at a high level and then drop down to detail and actually show code just now and then. But mainly I'm going to talk about ideas and stimulate thoughts as to how we can do things. So my very first scenario is called interactivity. It's for a company called Business Controls, and they are the country's leading incident reporting and risk management firm. And I read that and I go, what the heck is that? So this is a company that provides a website for employees typically to go to a place and anonymously, if they want to, say, hey, my supervisor seems to be carrying out boxes of brand new laptops and putting them in the back of his car. Or how come my CFO has a brand new car every week? Or hey, I noticed that my coworker is being sexually harassed and she doesn't seem to know how to do anything about it. So they can go to this website and anonymously report incidents. And each incident has an incident type, and those incident types vary by what I'm calling context, because they have multiple websites. One is called MySafe Workplace, another called MySafe Campus, MySafe Hospital, and when they expand, probably into MySafe Zoo or MySafe Prison, for all we know. But the term context and the term incident type, so when we're talking about plagiarism, that would be in MySafe Campus, or medical malpractice would be MySafe Hospital. Anyway, they are in 80 countries, 40 languages, and they're available to over 1.5 million users. So the requirements that we had for this particular project, everything is very, very confidential. So the data that you're going to see today is all totally made up. But yeah, you can't have somebody from another company finding out information about your company. And more so, if you're involved in an incident, then you shouldn't be able to see that specific incident if you are the person who's being accused. So very, very confidential. They asked for a lot of interactivity, a lot of filters, a lot of drill downs. You'll see it. And most important, they wanted everything to look more or less the same across all websites. So the same RDL, the same reporting services report runs in all the different websites. And then they asked for the ability for the user to be able to maintain their preferences for a particular report. In other words, when I see this report, I always want you to pick these filters, these parameters, and this is what I always want to see. Oh, and by the way, when you do that, we're not prepared to purchase SharePoint. You've got to do it all within reporting services. And then the final requirement is one that everybody loves to get when you are developing stuff, and the comment that the owner of the company said, I really want this to be eye candy, and not only that, make it sexy. Yep, he actually said that to me.
Have you seen that requirement before, Mark?
That's the only company I've had that.
Okay.
So I want to start going into the methodology and the solution. And what I have done is I have actually built a cheat screen that I'm now in reporting services. And when somebody signs onto a particular website, I know the context because they've signed in as www.mysafeworkplace.com, and just getting some real estate back. And they've signed in with their user name, and so because of that, I've now got their user ID, and each user ID is associated with an organization. So this is just a pre-screen that I've used to emulate somebody signing onto the actual web page. But I also want to show you something with this, and that is that I've picked up the logo called MySafe Workplace. I've picked up a color, this blue, and I've just shown here in this box some of the database tables, some of the fields from the database table that we're going against to produce this bit of information. So I know that my context is workplace, my URL, which URL I came from, and when we talk about the institution, we want to talk about an organization. We've got a primary and a secondary color. So if somebody, for example, has signed on to MySafe Campus, that same report is running, but now I'm picking up a different logo and different colors and different words and different names. So it's all coming from a database table that's showing me very specifically what it is. So here's MySafe Hospital and the scrubs talking about hospitals. And I must admit that I like the blue the most for the demo, so I'm going to just keep using the blue. So by pushing this button on this particular report, I'm now emulating somebody having signed in. I know their context, I know their user ID, I know their organization, and now on the left-hand side of their particular menuing option on their application, they would now press and now be taken into their application. So we've talked about everything is database driven, the images, the names that I'm using, and the colors as well. I want to talk a little bit about report menuing. So there are a couple of different ways that you're going to see presented today, and the first one is actually a database table that contains in it the names of all the reports. It contains not only the FSRS RDL name, but also a name by which we want the user to know the report, and then also a description about the report. I'm going to switch back to the presentation to start showing you what the very, very first page of what they've called MyState Dashboard is. So the section at the top is a brief little ticker that's showing, hey, these are the incidents that exist at the moment. Move down to the next section, and that is pie charts showing different aspects of how they want to look at the particular incident report, by incident type, by status. Move down again, and we've got another set of pie charts that if one had been applicable, there would have been another pie chart here in this position. And then the piece that we're talking about at the moment, the actual menus. So here are report menus, the actual report names, and then a brief description as to what that report will do. Now, this is controlled and filtered by the user roles. So the person who's signed in, I know their user ID, I know their role, and based upon the role, I either show or don't show these particular reports. And the page, the list goes on and on and on. So even this last section, again, is for very specific authorities and roles that one has. I want to start showing you some of the interactivity in this particular code. The first one here is to look at this particular pie chart. And you can see that I've got a box at the top here, and you can see the arrow change to a hand as I hover over it. And this is saying click here to view this chart with the filtering capabilities. So when I move down to the next level, and I've just clicked it, I will now see exactly that same chart with exactly the same information. But now I have with it, I've explained what my filters are, and if I expand, I can actually show what the filters are that are available. So I want to see that same chart, but I want to see it was closed as well. So I would now view the report again. So it's exactly the same report. I've changed my filters, my parameters, and now I see all these different options in the pie chart. I can pick a segment of the particular pie chart, and I can go deeper now and look at detail that is making up the accounting misrepresentations. It shows me that 14 that we saw. And now this little plus sign here is the ability to expand everything happened in the corporate location. So I can now pick one of those incidents, and I will now be taken down, and I can look at the very, very specific details that pertain to this event. So here's my logo that got picked up, my URL being picked up, the fact that I'm dealing with an organization and not a hospital or a university. And then moving down the page, this person wanted to remain completely anonymous, and just all the information. I'm literally just scrolling through this just to show that all the information about that specific incident is available for viewing. So I'm going to use this button that I've got on the report just to return back to the main page to show you what other navigation is available from within the top page, what other interactions. So here again is the pie chart. Previously I pushed this button up here, but what I could do is bypass going to the page that had the filtering and I can go directly to the detail information we saw earlier. And you recognize this report. This is accounting misrepresentation this time with the corporate location expanding, etc. There's a third way that I can navigate to exactly that same report, and that is, let's just count them again, 1, 2, and the third way is actually from the menu. This time, the information is defaulted to the last 12 months. So I can go down here to all incident reports by incident type, click that, and now I'm taken to the same pie chart that we had previously, and I have all my parameters, and this time it's defaulted to the events that happened in the last year. And same again, I can click within the pie chart, move down to the next level.
Mark, excuse me 1 second. For those of us, I know we had some difficulty with the audio. That was a live meeting component. We are working on getting that fixed. Some of you have the dial-in number. I would request if you did dial in, please hit your mute button because we can hear you. So please go ahead and make sure your line is muted if you're not a presenter. Okay, thank you. Mark, my apologies for the interruption.
Rob. So we talked about report menuing. The next piece that I want to show you is that I had to produce a wireframe or a storyboard for reporting services. And you're like, what? So if you have a look at this picture here, this is showing that first report page that we went on with the little ticker that I had across the top. Then this first box here represents that very first pie chart. And if I clicked in that box at the top, I was taken to a more detailed report that just had that one pie chart with filters in it. I can then click on this, and I'm taken on a section of the pie chart, and I'm taken down to the next level, which was the one that had the expandable different locations. And then I could select a specific incident and move down and see the actual incident. Or from within my pie chart, right on the front page, I could have clicked from within the pie chart, bypassed this guy, and moved straight down to where the incident happened on a location basis, and again, click through and get to it. Or the third way that I showed you is from the history. This time I would have moved to this report using the different parameters and moved on down to exactly the same path that we had before. So everything had to be drawn out like this with these wireframes or storyboards. The next thing I want to talk about is the use filters. So back on this particular report, I want to show you that I've got two buttons over here. One of them says, press here to save these filters for this report for future use, and another one saying, press here to return to the main reporting page. I'm going to rerun this report, but it just so happens that I am always going to be only interested in what happened in 2007. So if I now review the report, this time looking at a specific year, and I could have changed which particular incident types I wanted to look at. So we're using multi-select drop-downs there. But now this is the report that I always want to see. This is the one I always want to see. So I would now click here to say, press here to save these filters. And in the next demo that talks about updates, I'm going to explain how this is done. But I've now invoked another report that says report parameters have saved. And now this is a key piece of it. I'm going to press here to return to the previous report. If I use the straight back arrow, all that's going to happen is I'm going to go back to the previous page, and I'm going to see that same report from cache. But what I wanted to do is to actually rerun that report. And you'll see what I mean. When it comes into view, you'll notice that at the bottom here, I've got another button that wasn't there before. And what that is showing is that if I come to this report under the normal way, I can then push this button and immediately see the filters and the parameters that I saved. So I'm going to return back to the main menu, and by pushing the main menu and running it this particular way, I am rerunning the report. I'm not doing what is in cache. And the reason that I did that, you'll see when I move down to the report section, I've gained a new button in this report. And this is saying use save filters. So now I've just created a fourth way to look at this particular report. The two from up above, this one number 3, or I can just go straight to looking at it in my way using the save filters. I want to point out two other ones here. The set the global filters. So most of these reports are driven around date ranges, incident types, statuses, and if I want to set those filters for all reports, I can do that using this particular button. Similarly, I can use this button down here to delete all my saved filters. So if I wanted to, I could do this one, set up the global filters, and it would set it up for everything, and all of these would have the default in, and then I can go into a specific report and override it at that level from within a specific report. So let's just go back to the slide. I can set individually on each report. I can change it at a global level for all reports and then override it at an individual report. And then I have the option to view that report using the system defaults or my personal saved preferences. And then the reason I put this navigation button in is just to remind us that when we then go and actually use those saved filters, I've got to rerun the report because it's going against the database and making decisions from the database as to how to populate the fields. So there is one more thing that I do want to demo from this, and that is one of my favorite reports and probably the one that was the most fun to create, and that is what we call the incident volume over time. So straight away, as the report is rendering the first time, I'm going to go ahead and just change these dates to fictitious dates and rerun the report so that we can look at how this report really works. The first thing that I want to point out is that it's rendering it by year, and that the information in the report is now broken down into the different years. Also, something that standard that I've kind of introduced everywhere is I show back what the filters were, but then I also want to acknowledge that somebody entered in dates that are kind of weird, and then I also want to say, hey, what truly was used is when the earliest incident for this organization is, and then we're actually going to stop it today and not go into the next year. So now from within this report, I can then click on a specific year, and now as we drill down to the next level, this report is now going to be broken down instead of by year, but my title is going to tell me that it's now by month. And when I look at this report, it's now got the months of the year listed across up to the current month, and I can pick the particular month that I want to look at and drill down on that as well. And so now I'm down at the day level, and so when this report shows me here by day, I can move down and see how the incidents came through during the month. And I can see, wow, on the 30th, I had 20 different. I can again click on that section of the chart, move down, and you will recognize this report because it is exactly the report that we've seen before, where everything is by location, it's by the date entered. There's the 20 that we saw, and sure enough, it's by location. I can expand it and move down to the detail level as we did before. There is one more report that I want to show you, but I need to sign on as a different organization because that's where I had built the data for this particular report. So I'm doing exactly the same thing again, pretending that I've come in. This time I've signed on to organization number 94. And from the menu option this time, I'm going to pick this report called All Incident Reports by State. And one might ask what state means. And as we look at this report, it becomes clear. And we have a Dundas map of the United States showing how the incidents from 0 to the most are dispersed in the United States. And so the color gets darker the more the incidents are. And so I can then click on Florida, which has 82 incidents in it. And I am taken once again to that same report that you're getting sick of by now, where everything is broken out by the location, and I and look at the specific incident across my United States.
Nice. Excuse me once again, Mark. I'm sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to say again, for those of you who were having difficulty and received the dial-in number, please mute your phone lines because we can hear the rustling in the background. So again, for those of you who have access to the dial-in information, please mute the phone lines. Thanks. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, the second scenario is one that I've called updating, and this is for Crimson Circle Energy Company. This company does presentations and workshops around the world. It's unbelievable how many people around the world attend these different workshops. They have multiple teachers, different disciplines, and each discipline has its own website. They hold these monthly webcasts that typically over 100,000 people sign in and watch one of these demonstrations. There are multiple different company stores, again, around the world, and they are selling their different products and classes. And I just added this logo just so that people can see. I just love this logo that they've come up with. And they call the people who have been through these workshops, they call them chambre. And you'll see that term used a little bit, chambre. And then institute is their whole teaching arm. So for this particular scenario, the requirement that we want to focus in on is this duplication resolution. So they have all these different websites, and it seems that people don't always use or spell their name the same way when they sign on. So me, I could sign on as Mark space Breen, or Mark space J space Breen, or Mark space J period space Breen, or I could even spell my name wrong. But there is the ETL function that happens every night that downloads all the new people who have signed on to these websites, who have purchased something from any one of the stores, and it stores all that information in a central repository for all the users from the different websites. And so that could mean that Mark Breen, my example, is in there 4 or 5 times. So they need the ability to be able to recognize those users and merge them together. The second part of this is that they have this ability for the people who are registering for an event to show up on the day of the event, and they have PCs with internet access in the rooms where they're doing the workshops, and they have the people sign up there, then and there. So that information needs to be on demand, moved from the company store, which is where you sign up for these events, and moved to the central repository so that the teacher can print out a class list and then also the certificates at the end. So I want to go ahead and demo this to you, and I'm going to move back to reporting services, and this particular one is over here under Chambre reports. And again, I've got a little backdoor in here that's in essence representing somebody signing onto the website and now looking at a particular set of reports. Again, I'm using that same menuing function here. Again, I'm using the roles of the person who's signed in, and here I'm being welcomed in. And so I'm going to look at this Review Chambre Email Duplicates report. This is a report, and I just want to stress that again. This is a report. So if I look at this report, and I look at this very first person, oh, this idiot, Mark Breen, doesn't know how to spell his name. Once here he spells it with an E, here he's put his initial, and here he's put initial and a period. But he has been consistent and used the same email address every time. So we've acknowledged that as we look across here, his address is the same. He's from Cape Town, South Africa. Oh, except here he suddenly thought he was from Prague in Czech. I wonder what I was on that day. And sometimes I've entered the telephone number, and sometimes I haven't. So I have these buttons here to choose which one of these do I want to merge all my information to. And this one looks to be the best one. So I click that button, and I'm taken down to the next report, which is basically what I'm calling the setup report. And it's saying, this is the one that you want to merge everything to, and these are the three that you're going to move and merge to this guy. Is this really what you want to do? And you go, yep, this is what I want to do. And so now it runs another report, and that report says, yep, we've done that. So I want to move back and look at exactly what's going on over here. Here's my database tables that are affected by what has just happened. Here's my Chambre database table that has my person in, and it's got 4 entries, one for each of those people. So each of those has got a primary key. That primary key is now used as a foreign key in any comments or images or any other attributes or any certificates that I have. If I'm also a teacher, then there are another set of foreign keys. And these are the events, these are things that I've either purchased or courses that I've attended, or if I'm a teacher, the events that I've taught at. So here again, I've got another set of foreign keys. So the update button is going to go through, and it's going to update all the foreign keys in these tables to point to the one Chambre record that I'm now going to merge everything to. And then it's going to delete the other 3 from the system. Or you could inactivate them, whatever you wanted to specifically do. So how are we doing this update? We saw the setup screen where I set everything up, and then I had a button that gets pushed. And when I go to execute the next report, the very first thing that runs every time in producing a new report or rendering a report is that it executes whatever SQL is required to build the data set that is then going to be used in the report. So why not change this data set? Instead of making it a select, why not make it an update, an insert, a delete, or whatever you need to do? Because it's still just a stored procedure. And then render the report. And all that this report says, it's just a confirmation saying this ran. So the work is being done in the report that confirms that the action happened. Let's talk about number 3 now. This is the one about precision. This is a company that performs analysis on stocks, mutual funds, etc. And one of their products is a brochure, or what they call a fact sheet, about a specific ticker symbol. And I've got to say that these are the most detailed requirements I have ever seen in my life, and I'm actually going to show you some of those on the next screen. They really wanted things to look professional. Some of the challenges were that they have these background images on the page. So if a particular fact sheet was across multiple pages, they wanted the color, the background of image to go from light to dark on the first page, and then on the last page go from dark to light, and then on all the pages in between, no matter how many, they wanted just this band across the top. So very different. They wanted them to also be able to use their own color branding on the pie charts and on the graphs. So the biggest section of the pie chart had to have a certain color. Then the next largest segment needed to have the next color. So it was all very, very, very defined. And then they wanted these real crisp edges on the charts. So here's an example of the particular fun fact sheet that we wanted. And you can see here that I'm told what particular font to use. And it's too small to really read, but there's detailed information as to where it's got to be 0.5, 1.4 from the top edge. You can see here's the page edging, and then they show that the distance, the image, going all the way to the edge. This one here has to be 0.2125 space apart, showing exactly where everything is. Let's look at that in a bit more detail. This line here has to start at approximately, note the word approximately, 8.2235 inches from the top. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, how am I going approximately 2.732? Unbelievable. And then here's the chart that's saying, okay, use this segment, this color for the largest, then the second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. as we go through. Okay, how am I going to do that? So let's go and look at one of these fact sheets and actually look at how this is being done. So the very, very first thing to note is that we have to set up that the margins are zeros. In other words, we want the printing to go all the way to the edge of the page. So straight away you should be saying, oh, okay, they need a special printer to be able to print stuff all the way to the edge. And yeah, they do. The other key thing to notice is when you're dealing with detail as that as to where these boxes and these different things start, you've got to change your grid at the back. And so my grid spacing here is 0.05. Also, you can see when I click on a specific page, here's my background image. So if I look down at where this particular segment starts, you can see that I've had to be 6.9619 to get it to be exactly where they wanted it to be. There's another little trick that I've discovered, and that is that when one is dealing with different fonts and font types, that it can cause problems as well. So this particular font is a Zurich BT, and this one here is a Zurich Extended. And we noticed that when we printed things, that the first letter in this one, in the straight Zurich, did not line up exactly with the Zurich Extended. So I had to use another trick, and that is in here, it's called padding. So my left padding for the straight Zurich is 2, and on this particular one, my left padding is 1. And in doing that, I was able to line them up. And you could tell this. My customer would take a ruler and look at it under a magnifying glass to make sure that this was exactly what he wanted. I want to just look briefly at Dundas, because that is what we had to use to be able to do the charting as so exact as we had to do. And there are just far more available things that you can change and mess with. It was when I got to this tab, the Advanced tab, that really just blew me away. That here is where I've said, okay, this is the color associated with the biggest segment, then this one, then this one, then this one, then this one, and I stopped at that level for this demo. But not only that, you can go in and look at all these different parts of the chart. It's absolutely incredible the detail that you can do with Dundas. I want to show you on this one as well one of the really, really nice features that you can use is they actually show you the chart over here. So if I go into the advanced segment and I'll look at my x-axis, for example, and I'm going to change that particular line to a 2, and notice what happens to this line here. And you see that then and there. So you can play with each of these different parts in it, and it just everything becomes very, very clear. When I first started this, notice what happens on the far right-hand side here when I change this value here. This line just appears, and when we first worked with this report, this line was here, and I could not get rid of it because I would have thought that was part of an x-axis thing, but it's not. It's the shadow offset. So you have control over absolutely everything. It's absolutely incredible. Go back to the presentation. We talked about the watermark. Oh, overlays. Yeah, let's talk about overlays. You can see on this that I've got one logo at the back here. I've got another logo on top of that, and then I've got the actual data coming on top of that as well. So overlays, and you'll see why I brought that out. We talked about the grid size. We talked about the zero margins. We talked about the fonts and the use of the pad. Then Dundas and the granular settings, the legends, the colors, all of that can be controlled. Now, the only way that I could put that ability to be able to have on one page have the watermark go one way and the other watermark to go the other way on the separate page was to use sub-reports. So this actually is the report that's being used to build this particular one we looked at. And so page 1 and page 2 are sub-reports. I'm going to go off to my financial company, and I'm actually going to run that report now as well and look at what it looks like. And I've created, again, just totally fictitious data. And in case you didn't know, my name is, from today, it's now a ticker. And it's probably worthless, but anyway, it's a ticker nonetheless. Anyway, so this report runs, and what it renders, I'm so excited. I've done all this hard work. I've measured everything down to the minutest detail, and I go in and I'm looking at it and suddenly it renders, and I go, what is this? My logo, my first logo is up here, my second one's, and one of the charts off to this, and I'm looking at it, I go, this is disaster. How am I going to be able to present this to the customer? And here's this black line in the middle of the watermark and more data. What is going on? And I paste, oh, here's the other chart that we have, and then more, oh, and I'm thinking, how am I going to explain that I can't do, oh, this page looks a little bit better. I seriously got into panic mode about this, like, what is this going to look like? And I realized that the actual end result of what we were going to do was we're going to export this to a PDF. And when I show you this PDF, it's beautiful. Everything is perfect. These logos go all the way to the edge. The charts are in the correct place. I didn't point out that in the previous thing, some of these words were missing. Let me just go back to that. I don't want to install that now. Let's do that. So the D is missing from fund, the K missing from risk, the word and is missing over there. And I'm just, oh no. But here, everything is just perfect. You can see the color starting, going to dark, from light to dark, and then page 2, going dark to light. And this is truly a precision example. It is a work of art. Just amazing what the final piece looks like. I want to move on to our fourth scenario, and this is what I've called framework. And the thing that what we had to build this for was for a sexual offenders registration, and I'm sure all of you have heard stories of before we knew where people in our neighborhood, what they had done. You've heard about stories where somebody has been attacked in their own neighborhood by somebody who has already been in prison for committing some sexual offense. And I wanted to say that when we were selected to work on this particular project, it was an absolutely incredible project to work on because you're making a difference. It is not like one of my gigs where I had to help a company. They found out that they could make money from when people failed to pay their mortgages on time, and we were hired to help them do it faster and better. And I hated going to work each day while I was doing that. But this is a project where we made a difference, and you long for projects like this. Absolutely incredible. But their requirements were, they had these 40 different letter types, letters sent to tell the sex offender, hey, you need to register. And based upon the sex offender's type, you either have to register once every 3 months or once a year. Literally 40 different types of letters. They either would do these letters on demand, in other words, one at a time for a particular offender, and I've used the word flyer as well. They produce flyers for the community, for the police officer that is going to have jurisdiction over where this person lives. Then they have this concept of batch letters where all those offenders whose registration anniversary hits today or in a week's time, you produce this batch of letters. If somebody moves their primary address, or if they change employment, or they change their school, we've got to produce a letter. They're going to be moving within the same police jurisdiction or outside. And then if the person hasn't registered within enough time, we're going to produce a police investigation letter. And again, that's just a date-driven today. Oh, we need to produce the batch of letters. And then these different flyers, and it's based on residence and school, employment, different wording based upon the different offender types. I think I might actually have an example. Here we go. This is actually an example of one of the letters that needs to be produced. So it's coming, again, just fake data, the 555, paragraph about it, who this person is, and the person's name is, really bad man. He's been doing stuff. And then I got Nelson Mandela's signature in here. So this is an example of one of the letters that needs to be produced. Different flyers can show an example of that. And then probably the most important thing is this all information report. So in other words, when we are notifying a police department about a particular person, especially this person has not registered within the 10-day window that they have to register, we want to send out not only the police investigation letter, but then also this all information report that's going to go through, and this is all fake data, by the way. It just shows who the person is, where they live, what they've done, where they live, and it's just pages and pages. And I'm deliberately just ripping through this, pages and pages of detail that will assist them in doing their specific research, because now this person has a warrant out for their arrest. And some of that information could help. What vehicle did they drive? What scars? What tattoos? All that sort of stuff. And they wanted the ability to be able to maintain the letter contents, what signatures to use, what letterheads to use, the number of copies printed, and whether or not the all-information report was required, and what colors and reports. I want to talk a little bit about the solution, and I'm going to jump through some of this pretty quickly. This first table here is actually the letter type table. So I've got what the letter type is, what its name, its description, how many, what's the default. If I print this, typically we're going to produce 2. We want to send one out and then put one in the paper file. Who's this going to be addressed to? What type of address? Is this going to be addressed to the offender or to the police department or even to the victim? What phone number should we be using? What signature should we be using? And what format is that letter? So these other tables are just my foreign keys to the phone number, the letter format, the letter signature, the addressee type. And then the main table here is the table that contains all the content of the paragraphs. We developed this back in 2005 using SQL Server 2005, and so I had specific lines here saying is bold, is underlined, is italics. With the new release of 2008 that I've been playing with, I can do away with this type of thing because of their new HTML interpretation. And then what particular, so I can have which font, what my font size, all that sort of thing. There are a bunch of other tables that are used to house the letterhead going to contain it, what goes in the bottom of the flyer, what colors are we going to do to produce the labels that go on the files, what images are we going to use, where are they located. I don't actually store images in the database, just where they are located. And I clicked a little bit prematurely there. So here's the table to control that batch concept that we were talking about. Then I had to make some changes to the actual offender table, adding in what color do I want to use when I talk about this offender, what color needs to go with these labels, and then I want to put a description in as well. So when I talk about this type of offender, I want to talk about it in words that are recognizable and standard. So hopefully I still have, sometimes I time out on this particular report, but in this I've done a search already for my really bad man, and now I can go into this thing called letters and flyers, and I can, hopefully it'll not time out on me. And now I have all the letters that are in that particular table, and I'm just going to pick this one, the address verification letter. So here's my letter type. This is what we just talked about in the database table, what the name is, description, how many copies, what type of address this is, what type of phone number, what type of signature, what type of letter. And I can go in and edit the actual text. And you can see here all the different text. I do some substitution of keywords, and I use the @ sign over here. And let me just edit this particular one. You can see it's not bold, it's not underlined, it's not italics, Times New Roman 12. I can edit that, and I can say, well, I want this to be 18. I want it bold, underlined, and italics, and click OK. And so now the next time that that particular letter is run, I've changed all those features about that. Also, if the wording needs to be changed, I can just go in and change a word. And on the fly, the contents of the letter have now been changed. One last point that I want to show you with this, and again, this is all done using sub-reports. So if I go to my letter control, my letter control acknowledges that I'm going to produce a type of letter. So all I would do is just pass to my particular letter, this is the type of letter you want, so it's associated with a number, and how many copies of it are you going to produce, and what the address is. Because a letter is all about an address. It's not really about an offender, it's about an address. Where's that letter going to be sent? And then if I want the all information produced with it as well. So going back to the slide, this is the framework. In order to produce a type 1 letter, I call my letter control. That calls my address header. It calls letter call type 1, which also has a header. And it's going to call the all info, which has an all info header and an all info information to the side. So all of the letters, the different types of letters, are going to follow a similar type of thing. So in my batch flow, it's going to call the letter control, my address header, letter type 1. There it is again. And this is now the NVL. This is now the police investigation. Same thing. The letter control it's all reusable. Look at that, exactly the same. Here's the all info. So instead of having to write 40 plus different RDLs, I had to do far, far fewer than that and make everything reusable in this framework. Here again is the producing the flyers. You can come in from a particular offender, pick the flyer control, it produces a flyer that goes to the police department, a flyer that goes to the community. And so then if you're wanting to print a whole group of them and you've searched through the offenders by county, you then can come on down and come through like that. So this truly is a framework. We saw how the database tables, letter type, signature, letterheads, how you then do the maintenance, the framework that's being used. I didn't have time to show you that this time, instead of having that report menu using a report, what I have instead is the ability to drive a database, from the database, a list of all the reports. And then we talked a little bit about the batch letters and the batch flyers, and we've been demoing that as we go along. I know I've I had to rush through some of this, but would like to open it up if we do have any questions. Dion?
Thanks, everybody. We did hit our hour mark, so we definitely want to be mindful of everybody's time today. And again, thanks for joining us. We do have a couple questions in the queue, so we will definitely go ahead and answer those. We encourage everybody to stay with us. However, again, this webcast is being recorded and will be made available probably within the next couple of weeks. And, of course, we'll follow up with everybody as well to make sure that your questions were answered. So one of the questions, Mark, is any tips for overcoming exporting to Excel when not everything is expanded?
Okay, that actually is a great question, and I might even have so if I understand the question correctly, what is being spoken about there is that if when one comes into a particular report and one wants to export it to Excel, that when you're sitting with this plus sign that I showed before, that if I push the plus sign, I've expanded it, okay? Mm-hmm. And now when I export to Excel, only those lines that I've expanded are going to actually be shown in the Excel. So again, I push another one and it opens up. By the way, this is a pivot table, but not really. I've cheated, and you can change how you pivot it based upon the different, you can choose which order you want things selected and grouped by. So what I came up with here is this button called Expand All, and so I would then just change that to yes and rerun the report, and now everything is in the expanded position so that I can go ahead and export everything to Excel without having to click open every single button. That's a great question. Any others, Dion?
Thanks. We do have another one. What are some good steps as far as bridging the gap from my current environment to what you're describing? What's a good way to start?
Yeah, well, the number one way I would say is to probably set up a workshop where we can actually demo more of this in more detail with you guys and actually have me or one of my colleagues go through step by step what needs to be done within reporting services within Visual Studio itself. But I always think that part of what has really made these particular projects really successful is getting to understand the business and understanding what reporting services can actually do for you, and then mirroring the two to then come up with a solution.
Okay. We have another question that says, how do you initiate a batch report queue process?
Okay. So in the
Or, sorry, he clarified it. How do you set up reports in a batch queue and then initiate the process?
okay, so what we had there was that remember that we always start off with a data set running. And that data set can do whatever work it needs to do. So the very, very first step that we had, and we do it a couple of ways in what I demoed, but the one way is to have that initial report, that initial data set, go out and build a table and put in it all the elements that you wanted to have in that particular batch. You would then, because the update then completes, you then would go and read the elements, the rows that have been stored in that database table, and then that becomes the result set that is then used to render the report. At the end of producing that report and looking at say now, yep, I'm done, these are the reports that I want to then complete, there would be another button that would then cause another report to run, and that next report would also run a data set or a stored proc, and it would go off and erase those rows from the table. Okay? Dion, did you disappear?
I had my mute button down. So thank you very much. And the person that asked that question, please let us know if that did, Mark's answer was sufficient enough, or if we need to provide additional information. So if I don't think we have any other questions at this time. So again, I think that's about it. Unless anybody has, please feel free to put in another question. Otherwise, again, this is being recorded. And we did have one last question come in. It says, usually sub-reports imply performance implications. Comments on that?
Ah, very, very good. So if one calls a sub-report and you're going to be doing the work in that sub-report, so the bigger question here is, are you actually going to want to render the work that is done in that? So I think I'm answering the question slightly differently, because the biggest thing with sub-reports is, are you actually going to render the work that is done with sub-reports? So yes, there is a performance hit, but if you have to accomplish what you need to accomplish, you have to do it. So I look for other ways of improving the performance. Can I build a temporary table that is going to house that information to facilitate the work that's being done? So you've got to acknowledge, yes, there is a hit, and work around that.
And again, please let us know if Mark's answer covered everything that you needed, or if you have additional questions. We'll give everybody just a few more moments. And again, this is being recorded. This webcast is being recorded, so I will make sure to send out additional information to everybody when the recorded version is available. Mark, we have another question that says, comment a little more about differences in the way reports render in the browsers versus PDF, Excel, etc. Example, the report that went nuts in the browser but looked fine in exported PDF.
That's all to do with how HTML is being rendered in the report. So when you're looking at it through the report viewer, there's HTML that's being interpreted. So there's some other tricks in there as well. You've got to look at everything in the different ways that it's going to be rendered. So it's all HTML, to do with HTML and how spaces are interpreted, how the overlay is being interpreted.
Okay.
Yeah, that when I first saw that, I was, what?
Yeah, that's never a good feeling.
Yeah.
So again, the person that asked that question, if we need to provide any additional information, please let us know, but we want to make sure that we do answer everybody's questions.
And while there just is a break, I want to thank everybody for coming on board and listening and participating. And my whole goal that I really wanted to achieve with this was to stimulate ideas as to what you could be doing in your shop using reporting services. That's all. That's the number one thing, was to really stimulate ideas. Because some of these, you'll look at it and you'll say, why on earth are you using reporting services to do that? I can write an application to do it. Are you trying to, you've got the hammer as the tool, and I'm going to use the hammer no matter what. Acknowledge that. But it's more the fun, oh, if I can do that, maybe I can do this too. So the intent is to really stimulate. So thank you.
Absolutely. So we have a couple other logistical questions that came up. The PowerPoint presentation, absolutely. We will send out the PDF version of Mark's presentation to all of the folks that attended today. So you expect that by the end of the day today or first thing tomorrow. And then the recorded version, I will send out a link when it's available. It will be on the Neudesic website in about a week or so. So again, I will send out an email to everybody here that attended when that is available. We'll definitely send that out. And I think that's about it at this point. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We look forward to catching up with all of you again soon. And again, please feel free to reach out to myself with any additional questions. Some of the follow-ups that we've done from previous webcasts have included lunch and learn or lunch sessions with Neudesic consultants like Mark on site with you and your team, just for an hour, hour and a half lunch session to help do a deeper dive into some of these topics. So again, we'll follow up with you, and please feel free to reach out with any questions. And again, thank you all for joining us. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dion.
You bet, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.